And now, as we were discussing earlier, the cold weather, as we are in the grips of this icy cold and snow, what better time than now to discuss the Ice House murder?
Yes, this piece done by Sophie Burke and Dave Morin looks at the Ice House murder.
When the 18th Amendment to the Constitution was enacted in 1919, prohibiting the manufacture, sale, and possession of alcohol, a huge black market economy sprouted up. Speakeasies, or establishments which secretly served the illegal beverage, opened up in towns and cities across the country, and Marlborough was no exception.
And Marlborough was, particularly during Prohibition, and well, I can't say whether it's still, but a pretty hard drinking city. At one time, the city was the 5th largest shoe manufacturing city in the entire country. And shoe workers were not making big money. They got their fun in the speakeasies of the city.
This area here, Marlborough, because of its central location, was a great distribution point for bootleg liquors.
In 1923, Marlborough was a town of about 16,000 residents, and Edward T. Simino was mayor.
Marlborough was a small community then, and everyone knew everyone.
Many people in town would have heard of John Gerard, president and founder of the People's Ice Company, located off Lake Williams.
Yeah, I would say he was reasonably well known.
As president of one of the only 2 ice companies in town, Gerard had an important position in the community. Refrigerators were not yet available, so families and businesses were dependent on ice to preserve their food and cool their drinks, though of course, not illegal liquor, especially in summer. During winter, the ice from Lake Williams was cut and stored.
This is where the area behind us is where they used to chop the ice, and then they would bring it across the street into an ice house.
Once across the street at the People's Ice Company, the ice was stored in one of 3 ice houses until each house was full. Ice harvesting, as it was called, was labor-intensive, and at one time the People's Ice Company could have as many as 50 men working. And only the strong needed apply. The ice was packed in cakes of 200 pounds each with sawdust around them for insulation.
They had picks, and they would pull it off and they would pack it. They pack it by pushing it, so that they'd put one layer would go, well, say this way. One layer would go this way. Then they'd after they get that all filled, then the next one would go like that. Then the third one would go this way. Then the fourth one, so they'd crisscross them all the way up to get so that. Otherwise, if you didn't do that, when you went to break them out, you'd have a heck of a mess to keep them separate. So this way here, that it was easier to keep them separate.
On August 13th, 1923, John Gerard spent some time at the Elks Club, of which he was a member. Saying he wanted to show a friend a new automobile he recently purchased, he had the friend give him a ride to the ice company, where, he would later say, the auto was stored. The time was approximately 11 p.m.
Where was the driveway leading up to the office?
Oh, that would be, oh boy. It was a long driveway. Because they used to pack wood. They'd have, stacks of wood aside of it because they sold wood in the wintertime.
When Gerard and his friend arrived at the ice house, they were approached by 1 or more unknown men. At this point, there is no more mention of Gerard's friend in accounts of that night. An unknown man said to Mr. Gerard that he may enter the ice house, and Gerard later claimed to have found that odd since he was the owner of the business. However, he continued on and was shot.
The curious part of it was the police had been called, but no one knows who called. And we not even know if there was a phone in the facility at the time. Then somehow or another, a taxi cab showed up at the place to take someone home. Again, no one knows how or why the cab got there.
According to the Marlborough Enterprise of August 14, 1923, by the time the police arrived at the scene, Gerard was scarcely recognizable. Covered in blood, he told the officers, "They are in there," and struggled towards the waiting Row taxicab. He collapsed before he reached the taxi, and the police whisked him off to the Marlborough Hospital. More police soon arrived at the scene.
And about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, they heard a noise in the woods, and they thought maybe it was the killer returning to the scene. So they drew their guns and went into the woods, prepared to make an arrest or, if necessary, shoot somebody. And it turned out that it was a stray cow that was in the woods.
Over the course of the next 9 months, the police would have many stray cows or false leads. But when police searched the premises that night, they found 3 men cowering in the rafters of one of the ice houses. The men gave their names as Dennis Meehan, Richard Wortham, and Hugo Baldi. They claimed to have been at the ice house to conduct a business transaction with Gerard.
Based on all this information in the newspaper and the goings-on in the town at that time, Mr. Gerard was probably involved in an operation, not unlike many others going around.
He was bootlegging.
Meehan, Wortham, and Baldi had driven to the People's Ice Company in Meehan's Packard with 26 cases of scotch in the trunk. According to their account, they were held up by an unknown man upon their arrival. Meehan was mugged of $2,900, and the car, with the booze, was stolen. They were not, they said, involved with the shooting of Mr. Gerard, and Gerard agreed. In part. Gerard died from his bullet wounds the next day, but before he died, he released a statement exonerating Meehan and Wortham. Hugo Baldi was charged with murder. The same day that Gerard died, the police located Meehan's stolen Packard in Newtonville. A stray card had been left in the car with a phone number on it. When police traced the phone number to the Newton home of Bernardo Martini, they had found their second suspect. In Martini's cellar lay the 26 cases of alcohol stolen from the scene of the crime. Martini was arrested and charged with murder. The early days of the investigation were the most eventful. 2 days after the shooting and heist, the suspects were arraigned. For the next 4 months, they were held in the East Cambridge jail while the Commonwealth built its case against them. Do you think that justice won out? Do you think that what happened was fair?
Probably not. I don't think they got the right people. I think those 2 guys, although they were involved in it, in today's society probably get a 6 months suspended sentence.
But at the time, in 1923, that was the most sensational thing that had ever happened to Marlborough.
It was a high-profile case, probably none higher in Marlborough. I know that the city lost the mayor. He committed suicide. That didn't even make the amount of papers that this case did. The local paper was filled with this, week after week after week.
While the police investigated the case, one thing became clear. The heist and the shooting were not just an isolated incident. Soon, the city of Marlborough was brimming with state and federal detectives. The Marlborough Enterprise, August 18, 1923. The federal prohibition authorities are certain that Marlborough, and particularly the neighborhood of the Gerard establishment, was the central meeting place for bootleggers from all cities and towns in this vicinity. The Enterprise reported on a large touring car parked on Rollins Avenue for 2 days. It was thought that this car was a base for federal prohibition authorities. While the alleged agents were in town, the Enterprise noted that an awful slump has descended upon the business mart in certain sections. Meanwhile, the state detectives were doing work of their own. While Baldi and Martini sat moldering in East Cambridge jail cells, the state unearthed evidence which led them to believe, according to the Marlborough Enterprise, that a bootlegging ring has been operating on an immense scale for over a year. The police also believe that with the clearing of the present case, light will be thrown on a number of other cases of mystery as yet unsolved. Not only were speakeasy businesses suffering due to Marlborough's sudden position in the law enforcement limelight, but the rest of the community was also on edge. Rumors flew about the location of the murder weapon. On August 21st, a local man was visited by the Marlborough police on the basis of a rumor that he knew the whereabouts of the murder weapon. He didn't. On August 24th, Hugo Baldi and Bernardo Martini were brought to the Marlborough District Courthouse for a hearing on the charges of murder. On the day that Martini and Baldi were brought to trial, what did the outside of the courthouse look like?
Well, according to the newspaper records, there were thousands of people lined up along Main Street, up Bolton Street. The courtroom was crowded, just filled to capacity.
But the crowd would have no satisfaction on that day. The hearing was postponed 3 times while the prosecution attempted to strengthen their case. Eventually, it was apparent that the murder charges could not stand, and the state settled for less serious charges. Marlborough Enterprise, December 10th, 1923. Hugo Baldi of Somerville and Bernardo Martini of Newton, who have been in the Cambridge jail since August 15th, charged with the murder of John B. Gerard, president of the People's Ice Company of this city, were bailed Saturday, their indictments on the charge of murder having been changed. Finally, in April of 1924, Baldi and Martini were convicted of being accessories to murder and robbery and were sentenced to 5 to 10 years of hard labor in prison. The legal process from crime to conviction took over 9 months. During the trial, Meehan and Wortham, who turned witnesses for the state, gave one version of what happened on August 13th, 1923, while Hugo Baldi gave another. However, what really happened on that night is still unknown. One man in Marlborough has a special connection with Marlborough's most notorious unsolved crime. Bob Scott is John Gerard's nephew.
I knew about it when I was young, but I mean, it's just, it didn't have any effect on me as far as I know. I just knew there was an Uncle John. He was a big guy, and he had been shot at the ice house, and there was undesirable elements of kind.
Scott was born in the house above the ice office 3 months after his uncle's death.
What I gather, he was maybe 5'10", and he probably weighed about 250 pounds. He was pretty husky, pretty strong guy. Well, you know, he shot and dragged himself over to the telephone and called the Marlborough police.
Today, the biggest impact his uncle has had on him was that he was a strong-willed man who founded the People's Ice Company. The business stayed in the family until 1945, 22 years after John Gerard's death.
Kept the family, two brothers, my father and another brother-in-law, and he kept them all the jobs, you know, during the Depression. And tell you, boy, during the Depression, a job was something you didn't regard lightly.
For Marlborough Magazine, I'm Sophie Burke.
Wow, we have Marlborough's own little unsolved mystery.
Yeah.
Marlborough Magazine's Sophie Burke takes a look at a club dedicated to amateur radio here in Marlborough, the Algonquin Amateur Radio Club.
Once a month, KD1OS, K1IX, N1ZCD, KD1QS, and K1DIN meet in the Marlborough Middle School cafeteria. The rest of the time, these hams talk to each other from the privacy of their own homes or wherever they happen to be.
I think somebody wants to find us as that hobby where two guys go out, buy a whole bunch of equipment, go home, set it up, and talk to each other about what they bought.
These hams and about 70 others are members of the Algonquin Amateur Radio Club. The club has been in Marlborough since 1976, and since then they've grown into a vital community resource.
Anytime we have any emergencies in the city, it's just a matter of a telephone call to one or two individuals, and they're all here, about 15 of them. Big volunteers for the city of Marlborough, both in emergency management and many other areas for the city.
David Haralimbo is the club president.
The Algonquin Amateur Radio Club provides backup emergency communications and support to organizations within the Marlborough community, including fire, EMS, and of course we do stuff like security for the parades, and we do work with the hazmat days and helping the city.
The club members are drawn together by an interest in technology and radio communication.
The camaraderie, of course, between all the people involved in the organization, that's one of the best things. And getting out and getting together as a group, we get to do a lot of stuff. And giving something back to the community as well is a wonderful feature.
The first radios developed at the beginning of the 20th century were really amateur radios, examples of that human drive to communicate.
Hello?
In today's world, our communication needs have many outlets, from instant messaging to cell phones, but amateur radios still have their place.
As in Hurricane Katrina recently, amateur radio proved to be one of the few links that survived and was able to maintain communications, even though all the cell phone towers went down and email went down and computers went down. Amateur operators were able to provide continued processing of information to allow people to communicate and get word out of the community of what was needed in a very timely fashion. Because the first thing that happened when all the power went out is all the cell phone towers died within the first day or two because they didn't have power for their generators. So there's a definite need to maintain the amateur radio service.
Because of amateur radio's usefulness during emergencies, the Marlborough Emergency Management Team works closely with the Algonquin Amateur Radio Club. If the computers and phone networks died, the hams would still be able to coordinate emergency response efforts in Marlborough.
If we had a major disaster here in the city where we lost a fire in police radios, we would have police crews, we would have ham radio operators in the police station as well as in the cruisers as well as the fire trucks to give us communications.
Yes, I am currently at the Algonquin Amateur Radio Club, and we are demonstrating the radio system to the local cable channel.
Good to have that demo going on. Anybody have any comments they want to make to W1KOW or anybody that happens to be listening in over there?
While the technology and the camaraderie are big attractions for radio club operators, the opportunities to learn are also important. The learning begins with the test for the initial operator's license and goes on from there.
There are a lot of things to learn all the time, and it's one of those hobbies that just, I mean, there's just tons to read. And of course, I'm a general class operator right now, and I'm going for my amateur extra class soon, I hope. But there's a big, thick manual of things to learn, and some of it I know, some of it I don't know. I'll have to have other people teach me that.
And
so
you like that?
I love that.
After you get your license, the FCC issues you a call sign. Now all you need is a radio and a microphone, and you're ready to make contact.
At that point, you're ready to go. You can go out and pick up just a little portable, or you can go all out and add to it. I started out with a little portable, and it's growing.
One of the places hams get equipment is at flea markets, like the one the Algonquin Amateur Radio Club holds every February.
If I get the call, I will call across Radio America. Right across America, I will call.
This here is an antenna for amateur radio for 10 meters, and I'm going to, I don't know, it was in a grab box for $1, so I'm going to plug it in and see if it works.
I'm showing this piece of equipment that I built myself. And so I'm just showing it to some of my friends so they can see what I've done and so on and so forth. It's a monitoring piece of equipment for radio transmitters. I've been coming to this flea market since 1979, when Carl Field, W1SLH, was still living and helped put it together and so on and so forth, which is how I became introduced to the flea market. It's a great organization, and I'm glad to be here.
When they talk, ham radio operators send their signal to a repeater on Sligo Hill, which then repeats the messages to other radio operators. Club member Tim Ikeda found the radio club to be a great way to get hooked into the community after moving to the area from California.
It's very easy to move between different places, to simply call up on the different calling frequencies or call up different repeaters or just talk on the radio and find other people that are interested in what you're doing, helping you set up your stations and giving you advice and support to get up and running again. So it's a very open and friendly community.
And plugging into the network of amateur radio operators isn't possible only in the U.S. It's also possible worldwide.
In 1991, as a member of the Massachusetts-Ukraine Citizens Bridge, I went to Ukraine for the first time. One of the first things that we did, or that I did, was to get in touch with the president of the Nikolaev Amateur Radio Society. And he couldn't speak English, but we had just enough common language on amateur radio that we could talk to each other.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. The name here is Pete, Papa Echo Tango Echo. And yeah, I'm on the motorcycle, but I pulled over to the side of the road here. Initially, you just want to be able to use the repeaters, to be able to use the two-way radios. Then the next thing you know, you want to be able to work Africa. You want to be able to work the west coast of Africa, work into the Middle East, and be able to do it from home, but also be able to do it from the car. I mean, it's something else to work into the Middle East with 5 watts sideband from the parking lot of a supermarket just because you heard somebody in there. So you pick up the microphone and you answer the call back, and then you talk. Next thing you know, you're talking to somebody in Israel, or you're talking to somebody in Jordan.
For more information about amateur radio and how you can get involved, visit the Algonquin Amateur Radio Club's website or the website of the American Radio Relay League.
There's all kinds of people out there. It's a very fascinating world when you get involved in ham radio. So I'll toss it back to you, and I'll let you guys get on with the net. I just wanted to check in. I heard you guys in there. So I will say 73s to all, and you all have a good night. KD1QS, back to net.
For Marlborough Magazine, I'm Sophie Burke.